Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see everyone. We're going to run this as a meeting, so everyone's up on the screen, everyone can participate, but I think that stay on mute, and if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm sure when I hand it over to Thomas, he can give some more of the ground rules on how he wants to have things done, but in a small group, it's always good to have an interaction, I suppose. We've had a long collaboration over the last several years, lots of different activities, right, Thomas? And some of the things that you're talking about today are the second project we're working on in relation to SMEs, but also in tech transfer. So linking this together, understand how high growth technology companies can benefit at this interface between business objectives or business-driven IP thinking. And so it's great that the European Patent Office is focusing not only on just the examination of patents, which we know is important, but also the strategy and the use of this to create a better competitive situation for companies and for Europe. So with that, I would like to introduce Thomas Bereuter. And Thomas, why don't you take it from here? Great to have you, and introduce the rest of your colleagues. And look forward to listening to your session today. Please.
Thank you, Bo. So hello to everyone, and welcome to the workshop from research to high growth technology businesses. We will explore how IP can support the company creation and add value to your business from a strategic perspective. We will be using an illustrative success story of technology transfer in additive manufacturing. I'm Thomas Bereuter, and I'm with the European Patent Academy. The Academy is the EPO's external training arm. There I'm in charge of innovation support, and our focus is on IP-related needs of the high-growth technology businesses. As Bo mentioned, that is why we cooperate with SIP already for several years, and it is, thank you, Bo, it's a really fantastic cooperation. I think I will cross-reference several times during the whole session to our cooperation, or the different layers of cooperation that we have. All of them are extremely fruitful. Joining me today, although not as hoped, actually in a very socially very distant manner from separate locations, are I.Rudyk, EPO senior economist in our headquarters in Munich.
Thomas. Hi, everyone.
Yes, a short hello. To know the name you see below his picture, but it's always good to hear the voice. Professor J.Stampfl from TU Wien and co-founder of Lithoz and Cubicure.
Hello to everyone. Thanks for having me here.
Great. And last but not least, J.Ceulemans, EPO examiner and senior expert in The Hague.
Good morning, everyone.
As you can see, we have 3 experts on board with very different experiences, and they will shed light on the main topics of the workshop from different angles. If you're interested in more information about us, beyond what you will hear during the presentations, you will find our bios online, and we all have LinkedIn profiles. Each of the 3 colleagues, so as Bo mentioned, so how are we organizing the whole session? And we are not that many, and that means we can have here a hands-on approach. Each of the 3 colleagues will give a short introductory note, and we encourage you to let us know your questions right away. Everything that's directly related to the presentation, we deal on the spot. Of course, you might have some broader questions. Maybe those you can keep till we have the panel discussion that follows. That's the intention, and afterwards to have different broader views on the topics. What Bo also mentioned is that the high growth technology business initiative that we have created together is an important layer of cooperation. So it's actually the umbrella under which we work together. And one of the core elements have been the high growth technology business conference that we did in 2019 and 2021. And also the follow-up, so to fill the gap between the big conferences, we have the high growth technology business forums. And that these are main components of the HTB initiative that we have created together with SIP and LES, the Licensing Executive Society. One of the main outcomes actually of this cooperation, it was when we brainstormed about the way we convey our messages, how we do trainings, how we offer conferences, and how we convey the messages, is that we finally went away from a broad approach, and we had then more a focused approach. So we focused more on what decision makers, on the one hand, decision makers meaning CEOs, CTOs, the founders of companies, what they want to know about IP strategy, so that the IP strategy they decide upon actually supports the business. And on the other hand, a little bit separate from that, despite being the people in the same companies, these are the IP professionals. And there we focus then on what they need to know to succeed in implementing an IP management system. And one of the takeaways of all those efforts and activities that we have developed was that at the end of the day, it is about informed decision making. And that requires a reflection of the current competitive environment and the analysis of trends. And that is one of the strengths of the EPO. The EPO supports these efforts by providing the world's largest collection of patent data with more than 130 million patent documents, all accessible for free via Espacenet. So that is what the president, EPO's president Capinos, already mentioned in his keynote he gave. And this wealth of information can be used by businesses to derive patent searches and patent analytics to address their specific tailored needs. But beyond that, Ilya, as the senior economist of the EPO, is conducting studies that meet a much broader need. So he is thinking about what is interesting for a larger population of businesses. And Ilya will give the first presentation and share with us some insights from these studies. With Ilya, by the way, it's not only that Bo is one of the stars of the corporations. Ilya, with Ilya, I'm cooperating very intensively. There is hardly any relevant activity in my area which I would not do together with Ilya. So with having said that, I hand over to Ilya. Ilya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, for the nice words. Let me just start sharing my presentation and tell you about the main points that I would like to present to you. Okay, so this is some research that we did, as Thomas said, by focusing on some technology trends that we observed in patent data. And indeed, one of the observations was also reported by Judy as an examiner doing the examination work and looking at the inventions that are submitted for patent protection, is that already several years ago, we see really an increase in patent applications being filed in the area of additive manufacturing, or it's called also called 3D printing. And it has actually increased so much that we thought this is something that is very important, and we need to report on it. But the difficulty here was that it's a cross-sectional technology field, meaning that there are different technology from different traditional technology areas that are being combined to create a new technology area, which is additive manufacturing. So it was not an easy exercise, and we relied a lot on the expertise of examiners, especially Judy. So if I say examiners, it's mostly Judy, because she is a senior expert, and she has developed a lot of expertise in the area of additive manufacturing. But before I show you the overview, so what are the market trends and how does the market look like from the patenting perspective, let me give you a short introduction on what is actually additive manufacturing. Just a brief one, because I guess most of you more or less know what it is. So according to the ISO 52900, there's a definition, and just to give you the short one, as opposed to the traditional subtractive manufacturing, additive manufacturing is a process of joining different materials, be it polymers, which is most common one, metals, or even biomaterials or glass or cements, to make parts from 3D model data, and this is the core part. So we're not talking about just let's say a physical manufacturing process, but we're talking about the digital process, because in the beginning you need to create a digital model first, which you can then by using AM technologies actually create the product out of it. So the digital aspect is the key part and the most important part, as opposed to the traditional way of manufacturing products. Just to give you some numbers about the importance of that market, according to the Volas report, the most recent one, the size in 2020 in terms of sale approached nearly $13 billion US dollars, which might not be let's say too big compared to the overall manufacturing market, which comprises at around 13 trillion US dollars. So currently the additive manufacturing market is less than 1%, but there are expectations that it will increase to around 5% of the manufacturing area very soon. And why is this actually fascinating? Well, because if you look at the last 10 years, we had on average growth rates for that market of 27%. And despite the COVID pandemic, it has increased in 2020 by 7.5%. And maybe because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which really contributed to partially a destruction of the value chain, it might even increase and become more important in the future and continue growing at two-digit numbers. Next point that makes the area very fascinating is because it is expanding already in different industry areas. The most common at the moment is aerospace. So if you think about airplanes, there are many different parts where AM techniques have been used, because you can actually design things in a lighter way and stronger way, which, and as you know, weight is very important in the aerospace industry, and you can reduce weight without sacrificing on other properties by using additive manufacturing. The same medical and dental areas. So if you think about implants, this is a very traditional area where additive manufacturing technologies have been applied widely. Recently, power and energy, another one. There are also consumer markets. So Adidas and Nike reported that they have been printing parts of the shoes using additive manufacturing techniques. Automotive sector, here again, we see some, especially here, prototyping have been applied a lot in the past, but now it's moving more to the industrial manufacturing sector in the automotive area, food or printed electronics. Here, products have been reported as well as being 3D printed. So why is that revolutionizing the manufacturing sector, and this will be growing in the future, or can be expected to grow even further? Well, first of all, it's part of what has been coined as the fourth industrial revolution. It is driving the digitalization of different industries, and additive manufacturing is what is driving the digitalization of the manufacturing sectors, because it is based on digital models, so digital 3D models of products, which become the center of manufacturing, which allows for different new designs, geometries, which were not possible with traditional manufacturing techniques. Basically, it gives additional opportunities. Of course, it all depends whether the properties of the current products can also be established with the additive manufacturing techniques. But as Jürgen and Judy will present to you, indeed, the AM sector is keeping up and is in different sectors using different materials, is able not only to give new geometries and new design opportunities, but sometimes even better properties when it comes to end products. From an economic point of view, it will it has the potential to disrupt global supply chains and business models because it allows so-called on-demand production. Just to sketch it maybe in an extreme or a very simple way, but in principle, you could have a printer next to you. For example, BMW could have a printer in their premises, and another company sitting in the US could develop a 3D model which they can sell and send to the BMW facilities in Munich, and this is where it can be printed. It might sound like, let's say, like the future, but I think there are already cases where those things can be done, and especially given the supply chains that have been, let's say, have suffered a lot during the pandemic. It is something for industry to consider for the future to make them less dependent on the currently existing supply chains. The additive manufacturing techniques also allows for so-called mass customization. That means that manufacturing small series becomes less costly because you can modify the digital model in different ways at relatively low cost, and the printing itself, so the manufacturing remains at the same cost, which in turn allows for cost-efficient mass customization. Last but not least, what is currently driving the trend are developments in the areas of materials, and there are more and more materials that become competitive in the sense that products which are manufactured through additive manufacturing techniques are now having almost the same properties or even better properties than products developed and manufactured through traditional techniques. And Jürgen will tell us how that works, for example, in the ceramic sector. So what have we done? Well, after observing all those trends, as already explained, reported by examiners within the office, but also observing the economic developments, having a market which is growing fast and has also the potential to disrupt many different industries, we teamed up with Judy to develop a report and to present what is actually happening in terms of patenting at the European Patent Office. For that, we needed to create a kind of a technology map and define what are the different building blocks that actually make up for the additive manufacturing technology. And what you see here is a small scheme which consists of the different materials, and so far polymers and metals are the most important one at the moment. However, there's a lot happening in the ceramic sector, especially in the more recent times. And I guess some of you have already read many interesting things in the area of printing of organs, for example, which I think was quite fascinating. Also attracted a lot of audience, which I think is not ready yet, and Judy, I'm sure, can confirm. But nevertheless, when it comes to patenting, we do see patent application being submitted which use biomaterials, and also the biomaterial itself being developed and being developed. The second part, of course, the machines and processes. Here we look into the different AM technologies that exist, such as material extrusion, material jetting, power bed fusion, or binder jetting, to name the most important ones. But we also look at the current areas of research in terms of increasing the speed of printing or improving the quality of end products, or which is also a current trend, is the possibility to print composite materials, so the combination of polymers and metals, for example. The third one is the digital part, so talking about the software and control. So basically how to get from a cut model, so the digital model, to a printed product. It has to be controlled through software and digital technologies. And so this is this part related to the ICT and infrastructure, but also to the energy source for the 3D printing process. And last but not least, of course, the different application areas ranging from transportation, tooling, health, medical, food, energy, electronics, consumer goods, and construction, because one of the important features here that we indeed observe a lot of applications in different industry sectors. Here's the result. So this is the recent trend in patenting of additive manufacturing technology. And as you can see, especially in the most recent period, we see the number of applications at the EPO increasing from less than 1,000 in 2013 to over 4,000 in 2018. So it has more than quadrupled over only 5 years period. And indeed, it has been growing, so the patent applications in that area 10 times faster than the average growth of patent applications at the EPO. So this is a booming field and it continues to grow fast. As already explained, it has an impact not only on one industry, but on many, many, many different industries. However, at a different, let's say, magnitude at the moment. The industry where we see the highest demand for patent protection for application areas is health and medical. It's by far the largest one. However, in the more recent period, we saw stronger, or let's say faster developments in the energy sector. So if you think about turbines here, 3D printing using metals is becoming more and more important. The transportation sector, which transitions from using 3D printing technologies from prototyping to more industrial and mass production applications. Industrial tooling, which was traditionally an important field. Electronics here, printing of circuits. Here we also see increase activity in terms of patent protection, but the currently smallest field, but also the ones growing fastest, are construction areas, so 3D printing of houses or bridges, for example, using cement, consumer goods, and food. Now let's look at the market structure. What you see here are the top 20 additive manufacturing applicants at the EPO in the more recent period, and the two or the three largest applicants are General Electric and United Technologies from the US and Siemens from Germany. However, also those numbers are relatively large. If you combine the share of the top 25 applicants, it amounts only to 30%, which is, if you compare it to other fields, relatively low number, which means that there's a relatively low level of concentration in the additive manufacturing sphere, meaning that there are still a lot of players. Usually, this also tells us that we are in the beginning of the development in the industry, and there might be consolidation. Usually consolidation is observed when the market is getting matured. So there's still a lot of competition here. What is also interesting is that if you look at the names, there are actually companies from different industry sectors. We have General Electric and Siemens from the energy sector. We have, for example, companies like DSM or BASF from a chemical industry sector. We have IT companies such as HP. We have also transportation companies such as Rolls-Royce or Boeing or Airbus. But we also have specialists in the 3D printing areas such as 3D System or Stratasys. So there's indeed a kind of a mix of companies from very, very different industries, which is also unique to additive manufacturing. And what we also observe, if you look at the distribution by countries, there are actually two regions that are currently dominating. It's the US and Europe. Together, they are responsible or make up 20 out of 25 top applicants. Or okay, now we're presenting the top 20, but as you can see, so most companies are from Europe or through US, with just a few exemptions from Japan and Israel. But what is surprising is that you do not find companies from South Korea or China here, which actually are dominating the patenting in the digital technology area. If you look, for example, at computer technology or computer or AI or other technologies. So this was quite surprising that the shares of South Korea and China are less than 1% in that area. Last but not least, before I do the transition to the next presentation, what was also important for us is to look at the contribution of universities and also smaller companies. And as you can see here, in all AM applications, we saw a share of 11% by university and PROs, which is twice as high as the average share at EPO. So we do see a huge, a very large contribution of universities and PROs, especially when it comes to materials and the application domains. And we also see a larger contribution by SMEs, which accounts here to 22%, especially in the area of application domains and in the area of digital technologies. And the smaller companies will be also part of the remaining part of the presentation, because what is important for us for the EPO is not only to observe whether smaller players at universities are patenting, but what they actually do and how they use patents for commercial success. Therefore, we asked in a survey which we ran 2 years ago, how companies, so this is not specific to the additive manufacturing field, but in general applies to general problems of small and medium-sized enterprises, but also universities, is what hinders them actually to commercialize their technology. And as you can see, the most important reason for not exploiting the patented invention commercially is that it's still in development or still prospecting, so it has not reached, let's say, the market readiness level yet that is necessary to reach the market, but also for those that have, let's say, have successfully reached a commercialization stage, they still reported that the main barriers to them were finding the right partners, so finding companies who can help them to commercialize the technology, and also the cost and complexity of negotiation, meaning that even if they found a partner who is capable of and ready to support them, it was very difficult to come to terms with them that will allow a smooth commercialization of the technology. And to facilitate that process, we at the EPO, and together with Thomas and Bo contributed as well, have developed a series of case studies where we want to show how European SMEs which are patenting can actually use patents to create strategic value and to reach the commercialization stage. And we're trying to report on the whole journey, so starting from the technology until the technology is on the market, and maybe a step beyond, so doing an IPO or even being acquired by another company. And what we want to highlight there is how patents can facilitate that process and be an important step in, for example, the development of the business model, or in the investment stage, or maybe in the stage of a successful cooperation with another company. Please have a look at the series. But what is more important for today is that we have J.Stampfl, who actually contributed actively to the creation of 2 of the companies that we developed the case study on. And with that, I give over to Thomas.
Thank you, Ilya. Very interesting. Before we transition to the next presentation, I think we have the time and the occasion to address some direct questions that you might have that we can still discuss with Ilya. And also we could go back to slides if you have concrete questions. Are there any? Maybe just while you're still thinking about it, maybe just to comment on one particular aspect. Ilya has shown a slide about freedom to operate. So that freedom to operate was only in 5% of the cases where we asked the SMEs what barriers they have. Only in 5% of the cases they have seen freedom to operate as a barrier. So that was a very positive surprise to us, because freedom to operate is often showing up in public discussions as being a big threat and a big challenge. I think important is how you address freedom to operate searches. So here I see a direct connection to the 3D printing area. So many companies, when they approach freedom to operate searches, they concentrate heavily on a competitor watch. So they observe what are, for example, the top 10 or top 5 competitors are doing, what patents are they filing, and is there any threat that some of the products the company has could potentially infringe patents of the competitors. So that is usually a shortcut. And 3D printing, based on the statistics that Ilya has shown, it is a little bit more tricky. I think the shortcut here is a little bit risky because Siemens might look at GE, but might overlook that Nike has patents in 3D printing, and maybe a patent of Nike could be infringed. So here, actually, the shortcut is not the good one, not the first advice I would give. It's the contrary, to do a step back and to really look for the technologies that are out there. Which patents are active and upright? Do the shortcut in having specific searches, but specific on technology and not who is the applicant. So when you then are aware of this specific requests in your technology area, then I think you still can manage properly the freedom to operate searches. Just as a short comment to that. Any questions that we should address right away regarding the studies? If not, then I
question.
Yes,
if I may.
Victor, please.
Is there any specific technology areas where you see startups being more present? You mentioned these 3 different fields like materials, software control, and machines and processes.
Ilya, would you like
Sure.
to take that?
Yeah. So the highest share that we observe is in application domains. So here's the share of SMEs, but also universities is highest, which I think also makes sense, right? Because it might be easier for SMEs to let's say to establish ties with industry and to sell their products to them. The second one is digital. I assume digital because it might be the least capital intensive part, because I mean, we know that SME usually look for money, and if they have to acquire a lot of capital and machines and testing, etc., then it is quite costly for them. So, and in the digital area where you usually have to develop software programs, it might be more accessible for SMEs than in other areas.
Thank you. So I think
I can ask a quick question, Thomas.
Please.
To Ilya, the slide that you had where you broke them down by size of company, how difficult was it to create that slide? I know the ones with patents are easy for you guys at EPO, I suppose, but the one that had with the company sizes, do you have a database that makes that easy, or?
So actually, what we're using is Bureau van Dijk, so Orbis data set. So this is the company data set, which I think the most common. So they are almost monopoly in that area. And what we are doing at the moment, we're also looking at Crunchbase because that data set is growing really fast. So there are more and more companies that want to be active in Crunchbase, and the coverage is improving.
Because that's pretty useful to be able to see the size of the actors. I like that one. That was good. Thank you.
Yes. So then let's transition to the next presentation. And actually, this also connects then again to the question you had, Victor, because Jürgen will also present what kind of patents Cubicure, Lithoz were filing. And then I think we can close the circle and come back to that. In order to connect, I also would like to be a little bit more specific in respect to the last slide that Ilya has presented. It was about the case studies. Ilya presented the big picture, the why we did the case studies. So what it is about. I want to take out one particular aspect, because this was one of the important takeaways of the High Growth Technology Business Initiative. In the course of this initiative, we were thinking about how to convey the message to the business decision makers. We developed didactical concepts to support the advancements of their IP strategy. And these concepts are helpful without doubt. But for the less experienced ones, those concepts about IP strategy are a little bit abstract. A strategy is as much of an individual character. You know, it's like a tailored suit. So that's an individual. It's not a mass product. And so it is not easy to come up with that. And if you compare it with IP management, you have, for example, 4 pillars of IP management, and that's the same everywhere. Of course, the implementation differs and so, but the principles are the same from company to company. That's not true for an IP strategy. It's not that easy to standardize that and to teach and talk about that. And that is where the case studies come into play. So, and that is also one of the cooperations with Bo, with SIP. And with those case studies, we show how the young and also the well-established high growth technology businesses, how they have developed the IP management capabilities that they need. And in particular, how they are using IP strategically to their advantage. So what are the different approaches? What is in for me? What drives the business? And more recently, we went away from focusing mainly on SMEs, but we have taken into account the whole journey of a technology. So from an initial first idea in the research lab till the product and the services are successfully implemented, introduced into the market. The whole journey, and it's a long journey. And one of the striking effects is you always see then crystal clear that it might be that everyone can innovate, but no one can innovate alone. It's a long journey where you cooperate with others, where you have to get along with some challenges, and that you only can manage if you do it together with others that have the expertise, that have the resources, and so on. And that is what the case studies are about. That is why we did the case studies, and why the case studies are also highly requested. And today we are featuring Cubicure, and to some extent also Lithoz. These are 2 AM case studies from Vienna, and we have analyzed both of them during the case studies. And they perfectly show this journey from an initial research project to successful businesses. And that's where Professor J.Stampfl comes in. He will give this presentation. We both have been active, by the way, at the largest technical universities. So Jürgen has studied at the Technical University in Graz, became then professor in Vienna, was also in Stanford, by the way. And so we never have met at these times, because I have been at both universities, not in Stanford. And where we have met then, that was in a later stage, it was in 2013, when Jürgen applied for the Husker Prize, and I could share some experiences I made in Graz at the technology transfer office there. And I was happy to support there. And by the way, Jürgen won the Husker Prize, which in Austria is very prominent. Some say this is the Nobel Prize in Austria. And he won it even twice. And yes, so with this introduction, Jürgen, it's up to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, for this very kind introduction, and thanks for inviting me. I'll just try to share my screen now. Just a second. So this should work now, hopefully. Yeah, just having some issue here with my PowerPoint.
But it looks good.
Yeah, but I cannot move on. Yeah, now so I have to do it this way. Thanks, seems to work. First, some numbers which we mostly saw already in Ilya's presentation. As mentioned by Ilya, the market is growing really fast, and in the meantime we stand somewhere at around between 12 and 13 billion US dollar, and you see the growth rates have been pretty steady in the last years, and even during COVID there was a little bit of growth to observe. So that's quite impressive. Even more impressive are the valuations of typical AM companies. I didn't put the numbers on here, but we see some quite outrageously high valuations, to be honest. That might be due to the fact that people speculate in this market, but partially certainly also due to the fact that AM is really a digital technology, and there's a strong belief in the community and also in the financial market that such digital technologies will grow in the future, and the market share will grow and get to a level where it's a reasonably large industry in the manufacturing field. So these numbers make somehow sense, despite some exaggerations from time to time. Also very interesting is the sale of materials. That's the right diagram. So in my view, this indicates where people are really using this technology. So you can buy a machine, and many people buy a 3D printer, and in many cases, this printer ends up in some corner and no one uses it. So the system sales are probably not so indicative of the real use of the technology, whereas the material sales are, because if you don't use your printer, you also don't buy a material. And there it's quite surprising that it's really the polymer market that's dominating. And you see also these laser sintering polymer powders, there's these polymer filaments and photopolymers. They more or less make up 80 to 85% of the, also in this diagram, 80% of the market, and metals are much smaller, which is a little bit surprising, because if you look into news magazines and also in terms of started companies, there's a lot of activity going on in metals, and people always think metals is if you want to do something really useful, you have to make it out of metal, but the truth is this is not right. So the polymer market is really dominating, and this is also a big mismatch since I'm also professor as well as managing director. So on the academic level, the activities, they do not really reflect the industrial reality. This relates to all these biofabrication topics, which are super highly interesting, and lots of papers and patents and everything. But the market there is just close to zero. And similar in metals versus polymers. So this is an interesting observation, I think. In terms of startup companies, that's a recent study from AM Power. As we see really lots of startups happening in the last 10 years. Also probably approaching approaching 1,000 or more. Dominate in absolute numbers, dominated by the United States, but also Europe, as you see in this diagram, is really quite active, but also China especially in the last years. As if you shrink down this period to the last 5 years, it would probably look a little bit different, because many Asian countries, they have not been that active in the 10 years ago, but they are getting more and more active nowadays. Also very interesting in terms of relating the number of startups to the gross domestic product of the relevant countries, dividing it by the number of startups per euro in gross domestic product. Then the table looks a little bit different, and we see that especially the small countries are really on the top there, and Israel very on the top, also not that surprising. So Israel is a very strong country in digital manufacturing, I would say. especially related to all types of inkjet technologies, which mostly have been invented in Israel, but also Netherlands, and you see Austria is also quite active, Switzerland, Germany. So Europe actually is doing quite a well job in terms of AM startups, I would say. Yeah, regarding my group at the university, as I mentioned, I'm professor at TU Wien, but also managing director of Cubicure, and I was also one of the founders of Lithoz, but I'm no longer involved there. So my group at TU Wien, also we have 3 research groups there actually. Also one is headed by me and one by Professor Lischka, he's the polymer chemist, and Professor Owsiannikov, he's the biofabrication guy. So at TU Wien, we are roughly 40, 50 people in those 3 groups working on additive manufacturing and focusing on lithography-based additive manufacturing. And quite a few spin-offs came out of these groups, so mostly my group and Alex Owsiannikov's group. Lithoz was the first one. They are now around 100 people. Cubicure, second one, and now approaching 50 people in the next month. Incus, they are making metals, actually, way to be, with focusing on dentistry. And AbNano is a 2-photon lithography startup. They are making these fancy nanostructured and microstructured 3D parts. So overall, as mentioned, around 40, 50 people at the university, and close to, I think in the meantime, a little bit above 200 people in those startup companies. So in the meantime, we've gained, I would say, quite some experience how to do these things and how not to do them. And I think one of the reasons why we did a somehow reasonable job is that we really focused on something. As the market, as we saw in this previous slide in the beginning, is quite large. There's unfortunately not one 3D printing technology that can do everything. It would be nice if there's only one technology that would make it much easier, but actually there are many. And we focused on everything that's related to photopolymerization. So we don't do laser sintering, we don't do FDM, and we don't do many other things. So we really try to focus on a very specific topic, and there we want to be the best. Sometimes it works, sometimes unfortunately not. But anyway, also we are doing photopolymerization, but there we do everything from the synthesis of photoinitiators, synthesis of monomers, developing machines, doing the material characterization, application development, business development. So we really try to cover the whole process chain more or less, and leave out the rest. So the other technologies we don't focus on, but in the field of photopolymerization, we really try to cover everything. And as Thomas mentioned correctly, this is usually a long journey. So we started pretty much 20 years ago at TU Wien. So before that, as mentioned, I was at Stanford, where I tried to do my first little steps in additive manufacturing, and then at TU Wien, over the years, we built up the group I mentioned. And you see, this really takes a long time, right? And also we filed our first patents, I think in 2003 or so. So some of them are going to expire soon. And tried to get more professional over the years. In 2011, Lithoz was founded, so that was our first spin-off, and a couple of years later, Cubicure. And this was somehow a joint thing, also AM Ventures, which is now the largest European investment fund for additive manufacturing. Back then they were really small, but now they are quite large. But back then, I think we were one of their first investments. So they invested in Lithoz and also in Cubicure from the beginning on. Also there we started to look a bit more in detail into these financial things. And they back then got a minority share in Cubicure and Lithoz. 2016, Lithoz became the world market leader in ceramic 3D printing, and they still are. And I would say they are some of the gold standard in 3D printing of ceramics nowadays. 2018, AbNano, and a couple of years later, Incus, focusing on metals, also with AM Ventures involved. So they are they obviously trust the people in Vienna and invest in pretty much all of our spin-offs. And this year, also quite some activity happening. Also, Lithoz and Incus made an equity deal, but also Cubicure, and in our case, Align Technology invested. So Align is by far the largest user of additive manufacturing. They are making these transparent orthodontic aligners, and I think this is also a good indication. If a Silicon Valley company invests into a small Vienna company, obviously they have something to offer. Otherwise, they wouldn't come to Vienna. Okay, some other numbers. Yeah, just briefly skipping over that. Maybe interesting the number of patents. So we have really quite a large patent portfolio by now. So overall, TUV, Cubicure, Lithoz, Abnano, Incus have about 42 patent families, and well above 100 individual patents. But we also try to do some science. So if you look up Google Scholar, also the 3 professors at TUV, I think we are also trying to keep our scientific standards to a certain level. Turnover now of these spin-off companies is around approaching 20 million euro, with a very high export rate. So typically more than 90% is export. Okay, just some more specific pictures how these things look like. So here you see the CEOs, which all of them are graduates from Alex Ovsyannikov's in my group, the CEO of those companies. And in the middle, if I get my laser pointer, so this was our first 3D printer, this little thing here, back many years ago. The first self-made 3D printer, which still works. But the newer systems you see here, so the most recent system from Lithoz and also from Cubicure, which we just introduced a couple of weeks ago, a large-scale 3D printer for real industrial use with very high throughput and quite some amazing properties, I would say. Incus and Abnano, these nano printers. So the systems are very important, and also in terms of IP, obviously, but especially in terms of revenue. So living from materials in the beginning is almost impossible for a startup company in this field. So you probably somehow need to have a machine which you can sell, because this will give you the initial turnover and initial cash flow to survive the first years. Applications, Ilya mentioned already most of them. Also biomedical engineering is really big, and that's also a field where people are really making money, actually. So this is not just a hype or something. So biomedical engineering is really working. All these patient-specific geometries where AM can really give you a big edge compared to other technologies. So especially orthodontics at the moment, but digital dentistry in general, orthopedics, something that will be coming in my view, which is rather small at the moment, but this is one of our key targets for the next years to become stronger in electronics. So there, due to miniaturization, it really makes sense to print things, because we can print very small things, which is getting more and more difficult in injection molding, for example. So miniaturization plays into the hand of additive manufacturing, and this is something that might become very big in the future, but also engineering polymers and energy technology, which is more in the metals arena, I would say. So this is not that relevant for us, but energy industry is also important. Yeah, regarding patents, so here you see the numbers, so quite a few actually, so we try to take care of that, but as Thomas mentioned, this is not easy for SMEs especially to be professional there. Also somehow reasonable license income for the university, so around 500,000 euro by now, and the approach of the university is not necessarily to make money in the first place, but also encourage their former PhD students, typically these PhD students that start such a spin-off, give them a little bit of a benefit by granting them preferential access, meaning that usually the inventor of such a TOV patent, if he wants or he or she wants to commercialize it, the university makes it available to him, not for free, so we have to pay for that, but for reasonable financial conditions. Some learnings from what I did as a relevance of IP for spin-offs. It's important in the beginning because that's in the beginning it's really hard to evaluate a spin-off. So how much is it worth, right? If someone wants to invest into such a very recently founded company, it's very difficult to give a reasonable valuation. So the typical way people do it is not to look too much in the details, but have something more general. So if there's a credible management team, so if the investor thinks these guys might be able to do it, plus they have, let's say, 1 or 2 licenses or patents, plus a link to a network at the university, then something like 3 million euro is a ballpark number for such an initial evaluation. So in the beginning, it's important to have such patents. Also for joint developments and partnerships with large industrial partners, so they will be looking into that. Not so much for just selling machines, for the classical machine sales and material sales, no one takes care about patents. But if you want to team up with a large industrial partner, they will look into that. But in general, it's not so important for the first years, so it might easily be overlooked. But in the long run, IP is very important. So that's also one of the challenges. In the beginning, there are so many things to do, but still, and people might neglect IP a little bit, but this is in the long run certainly not a good idea. Another challenge is always the realistic view on the relevance of inventions. So that's where many groups then start to argue, and that's one of the main reasons why startups fail or even don't get started, because people cannot agree on how important is the initial invention. And I would say it's not very important for the first years, because everything else will become much more important. So people shouldn't put too much focus on that. As mentioned, in the long run, IP is very relevant, but it might be overlooked in the first years, so that should be avoided. And also how things change during the years. As in the beginning, it's a small team coming from the university, but over the years, other team members will contribute very heavily. And to balance that out, that's not easy, especially in terms of limited companies. But that's not so much an IP problem, that's more a problem of a legal problem, I would say. How can we somehow make people profit from the startup that contributed, maybe not in the very beginning, but contributed in later years very heavily. Okay, so that's it from my side. Thanks for listening. And if there are some questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jürgen. So that was also very interesting and inspiring. So the questions from you, the participants, of course, come first. So anything you would like to ask? Maybe to break the ice, a short comment from my side in respect to the positioning of the IP. So my personal experience is that it's often a little bit a pendulum. So when some universities, obviously not the Technical University in Vienna, but some universities, when they negotiate with startups, overestimate the value of the IP, and then negotiations are often extended too long, because there's asymmetry of expectations. You know, the founders need to get the IP, and the university wants to avoid that they give away a blockbuster for peanuts, and are getting blamed later on that they have given away a central asset for nearly nothing. And so that is often then results in overestimation of the value of IP in this initial stage. It's often also overestimated in relation to a discussion with investors, because what Jürgen said is exactly the thing. The team and the concept and the business plan are normally in the foreground and very, very important components. And only to hope, because you have patents, that investors come and invest, that's an overestimation. In the operational sense, then I have often observed that it is underestimated, because when you are building up a company and when you introduce new technologies in the market, you have to overcome one hurdle after the other, and you want to focus on those hurdles. But once you have done it, and the competitors see that it works, only then they come. they are not coming when you have to do the dirty work. They come when the market is ready. And then they copy you, and then you don't have the IP protection. After you...
Yeah, that's right. So that's definitely true. But again, if you don't survive the first 3 or 4 years, then all this strong IP wouldn't help you. So this is really, that's, as you said, you have to balance it out somehow. Yeah, that's how it is. That this is not easy, I would guess. Yeah. Exactly. But again, the management is still more important, I would say. Also in terms of IP, that's also, the management needs to take care of that and have a reasonable strategy there. So I would say that the main problem is still that people tend to overestimate the value of know-how and IP in general, I would say.
Yeah. So in order to address this topic of the importance of the people, I would like also to refer to one of the articles as an outcome of our High Growth Technology Business Initiative, an article published together with Bo that is called People as Enablers. And there we put the people in the different stages of a company development, in the different environments, from the different views. We always looked at how important are the people that create the know-how, that create the IP, that use the IP. Without them, nothing will happen. You know, a patent is then a paper. You can frame it, put it at the wall, and be proud that you have a paper. It's like then a Husker Prize. You frame it and put it there prominently, and you are proud that you have got it, but you have to use it, and that's the important aspect. And for that reason, you need to have the right people on board and to find the arrangements. And on one of the slides, last slides that you had, Jürgen, you also mentioned this aspect, that this is also a frequent reason for disagreement in the founding phase. Yeah. So when I was lecturing at the Technical University, I had a provocative question to the students when it was about business planning and so on. And then I asked them, what do you think, who is the biggest threat? So who is the one who destroys your startup? And then they were coming up with Microsoft, the Chinese, and whatever. And I said, no, it's you. It's yourself. You destroy it because you are disagreeing. You're not deciding. You're not looking what is important for the company. You are thinking about what is important for you. And these are the things that cause the challenges. And you can overcome then when you understand what is important. Oh, as an entrepreneurship professor, you of course have to mention something.
No, I think, well, first of all, what you said is correct, right? That's how the human dimension, of course, is always the trickiest. With inside, the battle within versus without. I'm curious about the battle without when it comes to additive manufacturing, 3D printing. What is the nature of the IP competition in this area? I know that Ilya started out by showing that there's a lot of patents, and then he told us that all those patents we saw on that chart only represented 30% of all the, or even less than what was on the chart. There's lots of patents out there. This is obviously not an area that people, or this is obviously an area that people consider to be the future. How easy is it to spin off something from from a university and create a small company in this ecosystem with big actors and so much attention with so much intellectual property out there. We had like 5% said freedom to operate bothered them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
most people, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
That's definitely difficult. Yeah, and there's a lot of litigation going on, right? So that's, and as Thomas mentioned, this will happen later on. You won't get sued in the first couple of years, but you might get sued later on. And I mean, the good thing is somehow that nowadays almost all very basic patents have as a good thing in terms of freedom to operate. That many initial patents, or almost all initial patents, have been expired. So the first patents were in 1985 or something like that, and so there is a certain degree of freedom to operate. And the systems themselves are pretty much open, I would say, in many cases. But it's moving on more in the direction of applications now. So that's where we see many activities happening, and especially in biomedical engineering, people have realized that there's money to make, right? Because if you look at the valuation of aligned technology, there are now, I don't know, we have around 20,000 people by now, just in orthodontics, and that's mostly 3D printing. So these 20,000 people are mostly 3D printing something. So this is really an industry now. So it's a little bit moving in the direction of applications, I would say.
It's interesting. When I saw 5% of the people were worried about FTO, I actually thought that was a high number. That's the funny thing, because I was like, wow, people actually know about IP, that they worry about this. That surprises me, because most small companies are just flying out there and to operate. That's something they learn about when they get a letter or something. But I've never heard of companies that said, I don't think, it's almost against being entrepreneurial not to give it a try because you think that something might happen to you.
Yeah, but they should take care a little bit more about that, I would say. So 5%, it should be more.
It should be more, but but it surprises me actually that it was that high given what I know. Yeah. All right. Very good.
Göran?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for a very good presentation, by the way. I've been working in a production industry in the research development department, and I've noticed the increase in sites over the world where they do basically piracy printing of things that has already been patented. Do you see the same pattern, and do you see a way of handling this situation where people, I mean, as a private person, you're allowed to make your own copies, of course, of designs, but not on an industrial level like a workshop for a car?
Yeah, that's actually, I think, even if I'm right, as in Austria, there's even the universities could be sued if they violate IP. That's, I think, different in Germany, for example, where they have this freedom to violate patents at the university level. In Austria, actually not, if I'm right, but there might be people here who know it better. But no one will care, typically. So I don't think it has ever been happened that a university has been sued. But all these, as at the university level, I would say it's more these copyright topics, right, in teaching, where they start to harass the professors and the teachers. So in teaching, this is not so much, I would say, on the physical level. It's more in terms, do I violate some copyrights if I show a YouTube video in my class? So that this is really becoming a problem, especially when we are working in a European project where we initially make so-called nuggets, also small teaching units for first teaching students, but these units might then also be used for outside education activities. And there, I'm just working on this copyright transfer agreement. This is really horrible. Then, that's we are getting sucked into these legal issues more and more, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I would like to shortcut now because we have to look at the timing. A short summary for Göran. In most jurisdictions, you can do research about an invention, but you cannot apply the invention. So because there are also research tools that are protected by IP. And of course, it would be an infringement if you apply that for research, but you can research about it and improve the technology, for example. And that's a research privilege that you have in most of the jurisdictions. And that is the reason why one of the reasons why the universities are not sued for infringement, because they study the inventions and they don't use them. So that's the approach. So, but I would like to do a transition to Judy's presentation that's also strongly linked to experiences at universities, because software patents, software, so let's put it this way, technology implemented in software is meanwhile nearly everywhere. But everywhere where you ask the researchers, they usually, so the majority will tell you you cannot get a patent. And when we want to have a good chance to go over the critical stages, when the product is implemented in the market and the competitors attempted to take over the technology, you want to have the proper IP protection. And coming back to the initial question that we had, I think it was Victor, when it was about where are the patents coming from, and materials and machines are quite dominant, was also the case for Jürgen, because that's the field of expertise where the researchers were coming from. But the inventions protected, implemented as software and then patent protected, that is raising, but it's not yet there where the potential would be. And in order to elaborate more on that, I hand over to Judy to learn more about the computer implemented inventions. So please take over.
Thank you, Thomas. I'll indeed start sharing. And so indeed, my part will focus on the digitalization aspects and how you can get protection for those aspects with patents. Fine. You are familiar with the additive manufacturing process, I figure, and it has been said already a few times this afternoon that, of course, what all of these technologies share is that you start from a digital file, the digital twin of the product that you want to obtain. And that is fed to the apparatus, and with the material, you then generate this product that you want to obtain, and you can do quality checks on the product. So all of this can be, of course, patent protected, but the digital aspects are more the surrounding ones, like what I've put in the yellow boxes is, for instance, simulations of the product that you indeed, when you have a new design based on also the capabilities of additive, you can try and simulate and see how the product would behave. Another one would be that you really try to simulate the process itself. But it's not only about the simulations and the modeling, it's also about generating data and interacting data with then software and doing analysis of that data. So data exchange, and that can be on the basis of sensors, of course, within the process, but also later when you do the quality check that you use that data and then feed it back into the system to improve either your model, your design, or you improve the process. So the all of this, and just as a sidestep, and you've heard already also about from Jürgen and Ilya. Again, you can apply for patents in many aspects, but a patent is, of course, for a technical invention. So you have to solve a technical problem, and that can be in many areas. as Jürgen has pointed out, it can be in the machines and processes or in the materials. But on a larger scale, if you look at what has been filed so far, it's mainly in the applications. As Jürgen also, because there's the money to be gained, and that's almost 50% in. If we look at materials and at processes and apparatuses, it's about 40%. Materials, roughly a quarter, and the digital is 10%. And there, because Jürgen said, yeah, in the apparatuses, of course, many have been transpired already. The early applications and patents on systems. But what we see now certainly happening is that the control and the monitoring of the processes is really taking off and taking a bigger share. And also, of course, the simulations that are kicking in, and artificial intelligence and machine learning as well. And that is, of course, where the patents and the digital aspect then become important and interesting. So if Thomas mentioned it, when we talk at the European Patent Office about the digital aspects of inventions, we call it computer implemented inventions, and in short, it's CII. So if you are looking for information on the digital aspects, then really you can rely on this expression to find back more information on the website of the EPO on this. And what it covers is that a computer or computer network, or more general programmable apparatuses like control units are involved, and typically at least some of the features are then related to a computer program. So this is at the core of the digitalization. And another topic that you have to be aware of and bear in mind when you are really digging into the digital aspect is the cornerstone of the patents, and certainly of the European Patent Office, is what we call the Article 52. And the Article 52 gives you really the basis for what you can apply for, and how you can obtain a patent for your invention. And I will briefly go into the article because it's the crux of then really knowing what you can file for and what not. And the article is built in 3 blocks. And the first block is specifying what the patent is based on. And it's a very generous and very broad way of defining, because it says that any invention in all fields of technology, so no exclusions from that part at least, and as long as your invention is new and inventive and has an industrial application, you can apply for a patent and you can get a patent and an IP right for it. But then the second block gives you at least, put some restrictions on it and gives a list of exclusions. And that's where Thomas referred to that indeed in some people's mind, there is this idea that software and certainly programs for computers cannot be patented. And that is based on the second block of this article. And I will focus on only 3 parts, 3 items from this list. That is mathematical methods, the programs for computers, and presentations of information, because I can relate those specifically to additive manufacturing. And the third block then, in fact, gives again the crack in the nut, where it says, well, those exclusions only apply to this list of items and activities if they are claimed and if they are filed for as such. And this is where the interpretation of the article and then what we call the guidelines will help you to at least file applications and come to patents for your for the digital aspects, because they relate to these exclusions. But as long as you can circumvent the as such, you will be able to get also patent protection for those aspects. And this I will try to now go in more detail to show you how this can be, this as such can be circumvented in fact. So let's start with mathematical methods. And mathematical methods is, in fact, in plain words, it's the calculations, it's using formulas, but it's also, like mentioned already, artificial intelligence and machine learning, or the simulations, because they are based on mathematical methods underlying it. And these are only excluded if they are purely abstract, or and so you can circumvent the exclusion if you make them applied, and the application can be either the technical application, or it can be on the basis of the technical implementation. And this is so as long as you really direct it to something concrete, like additive manufacturing process and control, for instance, of a process, or the decision of continuing with the process or aborting it if you detect too many defects, for instance, then you go beyond this purely abstract idea, and you are requiring technical means. And the technical means can be as broad as using a computer, but it can also be that you use indeed sensors to get certain data. And I'll come back in a minute on that as well. The technical implementation is typically on the hardware, where it's not so common in additive manufacturing that you would have an invention on that aspect, but it can be, of course. So to go a bit in the specifics of artificial intelligence and simulations, for instance, the requirement of the having a technical interaction or technical means can be that you, as said, that you're using a measurement data, so sensors, and you're using those data for your calculations or for your modeling. It can be also that it's on the output, so direct connection with then using the output of your calculations to implementing it, to changing the process, steering the process or the design of your product. And but the invention can also go further on really which model you're using, or which formulas, which neural network, for instance, and how you train it. That can be also an aspect. And the simulation, as said, it's really there. You can get also a protection for it, as long as you make it that it's first of all, that you're applying it on a computer or using a computer for the simulation. That's one thing. But then you also really have a specific use for the simulation. And the specific use is really over the whole scope, as we call it, of your protection, so that it's not purely for a scientific reason that you do this simulation. So it has to be really an intended use of the outcome. And one small note as on designs. There, of course, there are design rights. So what we, as for patents, consider is really that you have a technical aspect and a technical parameter of your product that you put, that you ask for a protection of that aspect, and it has to be then linked specifically to the functioning of the object. So it's not purely the drawing or the blueprint. That is for other IP rights, not for patents. So this is for mathematical methods. The next topic that I wanted to highlight was the programs for computers. And also those are in principle excluded, but if the outcome again, or the effects that they create goes beyond just the running of a program on a computer, and they come to a further technical effect that helps to solve this technical problem that you're mentioning or describing, then again, these programs for computers are also possible to be protected. And in additive, again, it's of course programs for computer. We think of a generic computer, but it can go beyond that. It's that also a processing unit or a processor can have, of course, software, so that it steers a certain device to obtain a certain process step. And this link is exactly what you come across in additive manufacturing very specifically. And we also, in the guidelines that the EPO provides, we give even examples of how you can formulate such claims and how you can get to the protection. And these computer programs are typically linked to processes, so process steps, but that you capture as instructions in software to then be realized either by the computer or by another device and make something happen in your process. So this is also something that you can get protection for if claimed and if formulated well enough. But it's mainly based on the method that is lying behind it. And as a further step on that one, because what has been heavily debated and discussed as well is data that relate to additive manufacturing. And this is something, of course, that I think Goran was hinting at a little bit. Of course, because it's a digital file, yes, you can exchange it easily and it can be reproduced. What we give as patents is not the data itself, and certainly not the blueprint, as I said before. It's pure if the data or the model is translated into instructions aiming at the apparatus, then we at least consider that you can get protection for that aspect. If you would describe a computer program only referring to the model, then we say, no, that is not sufficient, because that is what we call then a presentation of information. And that's the last topic where I want to get to. But at least that we make a very strong distinction between purely the design and what you need really to address apparatuses, to instruct them to get really the device working. And this makes the difference in what you get as protection. So with that having said, you come to presentation of information. So once more, the design itself is not protected by patents, at least not, and not for the moment. So, but it can be also that you show, of course, on a screen certain functioning of the apparatus, of the process, what is happening inside of the machine. And that can also then lead to a further protection if, at least again, under certain conditions, you define very well how this information then really guides, for instance, a human-machine interaction and gives really the internal functioning of the machine. If that is described well, that's also one aspect that can be then protected. But it's always on the functional. It's not on the cognitive part. It's really the information that is addressed to machines or to this interaction between human and machines. So that's a third one that I wanted to highlight. This is really in a nutshell and of what you can within the area of additive manufacturing can think of as further protections on the digital aspects of the technology. And if you want to have further information on that, on those aspects, then I can at least provide you with a list of material that is available on the website of the European Patent Office on the different aspects. And with this, I thank you for listening in on my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Unfortunately, we are a little bit over time, but if there is the one or the other question, then on our side, we are still prepared to take that. In addition, I would like to make you an offer. If any questions were not addressed, you had not the chance to post them, I will send you a LinkedIn invitation so that we can stay in contact. And if you have any particular questions to one of the speakers, I will forward them, and we are happy to follow up with you later on. We are a small group, so here we can make this kind of offer. But let's see if there is any question you still might have. If not, then I thank you all. I thank the presenters, Judy, Jürgen, and Ilya, who already had to open the next session, so he left in time, not earlier. So I thank you all for your interest, for your participation. I wish you a good time with the conference that goes ahead. And as already announced, let's see if we can stay in contact via LinkedIn. Would be a pleasure. We have a lot of follow-up activities already in planning, and we can stay in contact if you're interested, and of course address your questions you might then still have. So thank you all the best, and a nice weekend. Thank you. Bye.